How you going, buddies? Today I would like to talk about words in Australian languages, taboos, and the constant flux of the vocabularies of Australian Aboriginal languages. Now, the basic vocabulary of a language is usually considered to be very stable. Few loan words come in to replace native words. What is the stable vocabulary, you might wonder? Well, linguist Maurice Swadesh constructed two lists earlier in the 20th century, the long and the short Swadesh lists. You can check them to see what is considered to be the most stable vocabulary in language. I checked the short Swadesh list for Basque, for example, the language isolate here in Europe, and it turned out that although Basque has lots of words from Romance languages, there were only a few on the short Swadesh list. However, in Australia there have been taboo restrictions. Specifically, when someone has died, there has been a short and intense period of mourning, and then that person's name has not been allowed to be mentioned again for a generation. The time it takes for a new generation to grow up, so 20 years or so, I have been told. And also words that were similar to and reminded people of the person's name, they were also not allowed. So new words had to be brought in. And as a result, the vocabularies of Australian Aboriginal languages were in constant flux. Now, in later years, this taboo has started to disappear in some places, but in other places it is still strong. When my main consultant died, you might have noticed that I still haven't mentioned his name, but when he died, I talked to his nephew at the funeral. And the nephew told me that I have a son by the same name, and he mentioned the name, which to me must mean that the taboo must have disappeared. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said the name. In the 50s and 60s, this taboo was still very strong in the community, and in fact so strong that it was extended. All personal belongings of someone who had died had to be destroyed or thrown away, and even pictures had to be destroyed. And there are of course people who in later years, when the taboo started to disappear, have been very sad that they haven't had anything left to remember older relatives by, no pictures or anything. Anyway, despite the constant flux of words, it would seem that there is some stable terminology. So I have a short list here. First we have first and second person pronouns, which are very stable. Not in all Pama-Nyungan languages, but definitely in many. And I will get back to pronouns in another video. This does not include third person pronouns, by the way. Here we see a lot of variation across the continent, and there are in fact languages that do not have separate third person pronouns. Instead, they only make use of demonstratives. That one, this one, and so on. But first and second person pronouns are very stable. I have in earlier videos mentioned words that came up along the east and west coasts of Australia with Pidgin English. Along the west coast, Yawada, horse, and Gillaman, rifle, and up along the east coast, Yaraman, also horse. Here are two words for language that are very widespread. In the western part of Australia, language is called wanga in many languages. In the eastern part of Australia, the word for language is kogu, and you find this in many language names. One of them being kogu yimitir, from which the word kangaroo comes. I will come to that down here. This is a word that is spread out all over the world, and usually it means mama. Mama means mama. There is a twist in the northern half of Australia, because there mama in fact does not mean mama. It means papa. Yes, it does. And the word the small children use for mama is in fact pibi. In Ngara at least. P-I-P-I. Pibi. These two terms are also widespread. This was originally the man's responsibility, and this was the woman's responsibility. And mandu means meat, and any animal that was eaten could be referred to as mandu. Mai means vegetable food. And then there is this. I have realized that this seems to be a stable term as well. The word kangaroo, as I said, comes from kogu yimitir, which means our language, and is spoken in northeastern Queensland along the coast, where Captain Cook and his crew was stranded for a few weeks when they were fixing their ship. So this kogu yimitir word should be pronounced kangaroo, kangaroo. And it's the word for a specific species of kangaroo. In Ngara, the language I have studied and speak, which is incredibly conservative in some ways, we find this word, which means kangaroo in general. This is mangoro, mangoro. Now there are certain differences here. The biggest and most important difference is the first sound, obviously, but languages do change, and it so happens that these languages are thousands of kilometers apart, at opposite ends of a continent. We do have different R sounds as well. This is a flap, and this is the R sound with the tip of the tongue bent backwards, That doesn't bother me so much. They are both R sounds. Which R sound is probably not the most important thing. R sounds change when words are borrowed between Aboriginal languages and so on. So yeah, that's not a very big deal. There is a difference here too. We have an inserted stop here in the Ngara word. Now creating what is called a homorganic nasal stop cluster. This is a fancy term that means a consonant cluster, two consonants in this case, the first of which is a nasal and the other one is a stop, and both have the same place of articulation in the mouth. So we get mangoro. Now Pama-Nyungan languages are very big on homorganic nasal stop cluster, and if a word includes such a cluster or not, it affects what case suffixes are used. So That they have created a nasal stop cluster here is perhaps not so strange. I will come back to such clusters when I talk about case marking, specifically ergative, instrumental, and locative. So, Kangaroo and Mangoro, a few thousand kilometers apart, but obviously still the same word. You may be wondering more about where they got all the new words in the Aboriginal languages when old words had to be replaced. Well, they borrowed a lot, and there were also derivational processes at work, I am sure. This will be all for today. I will see you later.